and welcome to RCKicks. On today's show, what we're going to do is we're going to cover all the basics of RC. So if you're new to RC cars, or it was something you were into as a kid and you're just getting back into it now, I'm going to go over all the basic steps of everything you need, all the electronics you need, batteries, receivers, transmitters, kits, all that kind of stuff, but on a really simple, basic, just trying to explain what they do, how they plug into each other, and everything you need, so that when you go online and you place your orders, you know you've got everything and you won't receive everything, go to build it and then realize you don't have something. So the first thing you need to do, and ever so sorry about the voice, I'm still under the weather, so I hope you can understand me. It's getting a little bit better, but I'm still having to shout. So the first thing, what car do you want? Now, there is a massive selection of RC cars that you have to build. So you have to decide, the best thing to do is decide, where am I going to drive it? That's probably your first thing. Do you live very close to tennis courts? Do you live very close to flat open spaces? Do you live more in the countryside and you want to be driving on gravel, dirt, that kind of thing? Because that will really dictate what kind of car you're going to get. Because if you go and buy something like this, for instance, well, this needs a completely smooth, flat, open space because the suspension in it runs so low. So this is very limiting on where you can actually drive it. Now for me, driving this is very difficult because there's not much around me where I can go very easily and drive this car. So this is not a brilliant first car to go for. So that's one aspect. Two, it's what's your engineering skills like? Are you used to tinkering with things? Are you a complete novice? Are you not very good with a screwdriver? Because there's many different levels of kit. So you can start with something as simple and basic as a Grasshopper, a fantastic car, brilliant car, and it will give you just as much fun as going for a vintage racing buggy or going for a four-wheel drive racer. They can all give you lots of fun. So again, it's deciding where your skills are. Now, if you're very, very new to sort of engineering and putting things together, I would go more two-wheel drive to start with, because it means you've only got one gearbox to put together. Whereas if you're a little bit more confident and you're going to be driving more loose gravel, you might want to go for a four-wheel drive car. If you're looking at being able to get something that's super nimble and super fast, and you want to put some cones out and you want to drive around the cones, and then maybe you want to go to do some racing later on, then you might want to go down a more racing buggy or a vintage racing buggy. Then on top of that, you also have what you just like the look of. Do you like the fun stuff, the big fun things like this that will put your smile on your face, that you can blast around on the grass and it's pretty much bomb-proof? So there's lots of decisions. Also budget. What kind of budget have you got? Have you got a very tight budget? Are you running to a really tight budget to get all the electronics, the battery? Because you're starting up, it's more expensive. So maybe you want to go for a lower cost kit now, see how you get on in the hobby, and then maybe upgrade later on. These are all things you can take into account. Now for me, the first car I ever had back in the day was I had a Grasshopper, and it's a fantastic car. This one was about £65, so super cheap. But then you can go up to sort of £250, £300 cars. So again, that's a big difference in money. Doesn't mean you're going to get any more fun factor out of this car than this one, but it also depends on what you like. Do you like the look of this car? Do you like the look of this car? Are you more interested in a big wheel truck? These are all personal choices. But that's the first thing to think about. What kind of kit you want? Do you want a hardened basher? Then maybe you want to go down a Traxxas route. There's Traxxas now doing some building kits for their TRX4s and stuff like that, which is your huge, great, big monster 4x4s. So maybe this is what's more your sort of where you want to go. A lot more expensive and not what I'd class as a starter, But again, depends if you prefer doing crawling. So taking into account those kind of things, you have to decide what's best for you. Personally, if I was starting out, I probably wouldn't go too crazy on some of the more technical cars. I would start simple and just get something like a Hornet, a Grasshopper, something like that. It's reasonably cheap. It's only going to cost you sort of £60–70 for the kits. You can put them together really quickly. It's not going to take you hours and hours to cut out all the bodies and do all the stickers. So something like that, you could build that very quickly. It won't take you hours and hours because you want to just get it built and then experience having an RC car. So that's the kit. So that's stage one. What kit do you want? Also different manufacturers. I'm a big Tamiya fan, but there's lots. You've got Traxxas, you've got Schumacher. I've got some Schumacher cars. These are more race orientated. So a little bit more technical, a lot more carbon. So if you're looking more racy, maybe you want to go with a sort of a vintage Buggy from Tamiya as a race car. Maybe you want to go for a vintage Schumacher. Maybe you want to go for a more modern Schumacher. These are quite advanced cars. So as a starter, you probably wouldn't want to jump into one of these as such. But there's lots of different companies around. Kyosho is another one. And many others. Lottie. And those kind of things. I'm a big Tamiya fan. A lot of it's because of my childhood, so that's kind of where I lean more towards the Tamiyas. But lots of cars to choose from. If you want to go modern, vintage, loads of great choices. But start simple, I would. So something as simple as a Grasshopper, Hornet, two-wheel drive Buggy. Don't have to worry about all the drivetrain and stuff like that. So that's the kit. So that's your first decision. What kit do you want? Now, moving on to the next thing you need to think of. So, you've decided on your kit. Now, where did you buy it from? Well, you've got a few choices. You've got your local hobby shop. Google around and look and see if you've got a hobby shop. If you've got a hobby shop, get down there, chat to them, meet them. They'll be able to advise you. And it's great to support your local hobby shop because it's very difficult for them these days to keep going, and there's not that many of them left. And it's a lovely thing to do. So if you can get down to your local hobby shop, do that. Alternatively, you can go online and search to see where you can get the best deal for your kit. Shop around. You can get full bundles, and that's kind of an easy way to go, but not necessarily is the best way to go, but it's easy. Now, you can, with a little bit of effort, put together your own bundle which will suit you more, that might last you a little bit longer. So once you've decided on your kit, do a bit of research, get the right price, write down the price, look around. There's lots of online shops, you got eBay, all those kind of things, and then that's where you get your best bang for buck. Next, you've got to decide what you're going to use to control it. So most popular these days is the trigger style. This is more modern, a lot easier to get hold of. If you're coming back into it from a long time ago, you probably remember stick more. Now, I like stick because I'm old and I just like it, so I stick with stick. Oh, that's terrible. But the problem is they're not as easy to get hold of. Now, if you want to get one for a plane that's lots more channels, that's easy. But if you just want a standard RC one, there's not that many of them around. So if you're starting out, go with the trigger. They're just easier, especially if you add more cars later on and stuff like that. Now, the thing you want to make sure that whatever one you go for, that they do multiple cars, because it makes life easier. If you ever decide to buy a second car, you can actually have more than one car on these transmitters and they little memory. Now, these are not expensive. You don't have to spend an absolute fortune. This one is getting a little bit harder. This is a lot older, but these ones, you can pick these up for absolute peanuts and they're fantastic. I'll put a description below. Great thing to start off with. Takes a little bit of time to get used to the little screen on it, but once you read the instructions, they're brilliant, perfectly fine to get you going and stuff like that. When you buy these, they tend to come with the receiver. So transmitter, receiver. You turn the steering here, it sends it out. This is in the car, the aerial receives it, and that's how you get your inputs into the car. Now they tend to come as a bundle, and I highly recommend you just get one that comes with both. Sometimes you can get them with two if you're going to have other cars later on, but it just saves you having to pair them up, because you can buy different receivers that work with different transmitters, but for the sake of starting out, why put yourself through it? All you do is you buy a little kit that comes with both, and also the instructions will tell you how to pair it together. It also makes your life way easier than you bought this from one company, this from another. They're supposed to work on the same, and then you've got to figure out why they don't pair together. So if you're kicking off, simple and cheap as chips. Absolutely highly recommend them. And they're little, small, and because they're 2.4, they call it 2.4, the actual range is bonkers. If you're coming back into this from a long time ago when you used to use crystals, the distance that these things work now are amazing and cheap. So that's your second thing you need to do. Decide on your transmitter receiver package, whichever one you want to go for. Also, there's hundreds of different versions of these, but as long as it's 2.4, just go cheap. Go cheap. Don't go crazy expensive. There's no point getting some racing transmitter and receiver when your car's not there. You can spend 400, 500 pound on these, or you can spend 30, 40 quid. So don't go crazy. It's really easy to get into, oh, loads more, oh, it's super fast. These are good enough. I drive some of these cars with this, no problem. Now, unless you're going racing, you're not really going to notice the difference. So one of these is fine. With this, you can also do your turning limits, which is also nice and easy, so that you can how fast you have it turn, how much the wheels turn. So that's kind of as you get a little bit more into it, that this can actually give you that. So that's your transmitter and receiver. So that's your second choice you've got to make. Now the third choice is what electronic speed controller. Now what the hell is an electronic speed controller? Basically, the signal comes in for the receiver and it connects to the electronic speed controller. And this is your brains. This controls pretty much everything. So this plugs into this. There's a cable that comes out, just plugs in, usually goes into channel 2. You've got a plus and a minus, so you've got to put them around the right way. And that's that. So now your signal comes out of your transmitter into your receiver in the car. The information goes down into the brains, which is your electronic speed controller. Now this controls your battery in. So that's what your battery plugs into. And that's your motor. And then you've got your on-off switch. And this says to the motor, go forward, go backwards. And it controls all that aspect of the motor, and it deals with the battery. It does a lot of other little bits and pieces, but you don't need to know that now. You just need one of these. And then this connects to your motor. Most kits come with a standard 540 motor. When you're starting off, you instantly want to go, oh, I want a faster motor. Just start with this first. If you're not used to driving RC cars, this is perfectly fine to get you up and running for a couple of weeks until you're much more comfortable with the car, before you going, oh, I want to stick the fastest motor I can find. I want to go at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Perfectly acceptable, because there's nothing like spending ages building your car and then you smash it up constantly. Easy to upgrade later on down the road when you built your kit. That then basically connects to there, and that's how the motor gets its power from the battery. Now there's lots of motor upgrades you can do later on, but for the sake of a basic setup, don't worry too much about them, because there's lots of different motors and there's lots of different turns and lots of different power. This basically is a slight hop-up version of that. So when you have this in the kit and you go up to this one, it will give you a little bit more power. Won't go crazy, These are called brushed motors. You might have heard of brushless, but right now forget about brushless. Don't bother. If you're starting out from the beginning, forget about brushless. Just stick with brushed. It's simple, it's easy, and you can progress down the line. If you stick brushless into a starter kit, it will go like the clappers and you'll just smash it to pieces. That's for another episode. So brushed is what you want, and that's what usually comes with the kit. If it doesn't, you want a 540 motor, standard silver can they're called, good enough to get you started. You don't have to go ballistic, but you can upgrade later on when you're ready by undoing 2 screws, taking it out, putting it in, changing over the pinion, which is a cog that goes on the end, and then you can go a little bit faster. But let's not run before we can walk, eh? So that's your motor. Now you need to power it. Batteries. Now people get really hung up on batteries because there's lots of different versions and they're all very complicated, and then there's different types of battery. There's NIMH, there's something called LiPo. What the hell's a LiPo? And things like that. Don't worry about it. Forget LiPo. Don't even bother looking into LiPo if you're starting out. That's a whole other thing. I'll go into that a little bit later, but don't stress about it. What you basically want is a 7.2 standard battery. Now, if you're going for a different kit, that's a Tamiya connection. Different kits have different connections. So a little bit of research. I mean, you can easily cut it off and then put a different one on if you want. But if you're going Tamiya connection, and there's lots of different types of connection as well, but don't get bogged down too much. As long as that end matches what's on your electronic speed controller. See, here's an example. They don't work. So you've got a choice. I can either cut that off and put a different connector on it, but that's more work. And when you're starting out, don't bother. Just get an electronic speed controller and a battery and make sure they are the same. If you're buying an electronic speed controller for a Tamiya, make sure it says on the box Tamiya connector, and then you don't have to do any soldering or anything. So it saves you, because soldering, again, if you're just starting out, soldering's a whole other thing that you just don't want to deal with right now. And that's how it gets its power. We'll come on to charging. You want a standard 7.2 with your electronic speed controller. There'll be lots and lots of stats for this. Now, there's 2 main ones you want to know. What is the motor maximum power? So that when you upgrade from this, there is a limit to what it can actually drive. So if you get a super hopped up motor later on, it could draw too much for your electronic speed controller. But when you're starting out, it won't be a problem. Now, you can get lots and lots of electronic speed controllers and they can become a bit overwhelming at the beginning. The one I recommend if you're going Tamiya is Tamiya just do their own one. Or if you prefer something like this, it's perfect. Great quality, waterproof, very easy to use, very simple. This is not my crawler one, is it? Yeah, this is my crawler one. But this would still work perfectly in this. There's lots of different ones, but again, price is an issue as well. So keep it simple. Just make sure that when you run it with the stock motor, it'll be fine. When you upgrade, you have to check to make sure that this can actually run it. But again, this is more advanced. From out the box, the silver can will run on any of these. Tamiya do one as well, which is an easy one if you're going Tamiya. So that's that. Then you need a charger. Now, when you buy a battery, different batteries are charged in different ways. So there's a lot of chargers that you can get that charge lots of different types of batteries. And again, you get very bogged down in, oh my God, there's LiPo batteries and blah, blah, blah. So stick with your standard NIMH. A good battery charger. One that I use is one of these. Now this will charge just about all different types of batteries. So this is a little bit advanced, but this will last you down the line. This will do LiPos, MINH, all kinds of different ones. But you've got to read the instructions on this one because you have to program it. I'm not going to get into how you set it all up. That's a bit further down the line. But you can pick these up for very cheap. But you can also pick up other chargers that are very simple plug in, leave it to charge, and then it will just slow trickle charge them from that point of view. But if you stick with 7.2, pretty standard stuff, that will get you charging. One or two of these batteries, they're very cheap, they're not expensive. The actual 4,500 mAh, the higher that number, the more energy it can hold. That's basically the way to look at it. So that if it's a 5,000 or a 2,000, it's just a bigger bucket full of energy, and it means you'll go longer. Won't go faster, go longer. The 7.4 volts, that's pretty much what it's putting out. So if you go up to a higher one, that's going to make your car go faster. But then it depends on whether your other stuff can cope with it. But for now, stick with 7.2 and you'll be golden. What else is there? Now you need to steer it. So you've bought your kit, you bought your transmitter. Comes with the receiver. Then you've bought your electronic speed controller, which is probably the most tricky thing to decide which one you want to go for. Also, make sure it's brushed or brushless. They do vary, they're very different. Brushed means that you've got 2, brushless is 3 cables. But stay away from brushless for now. You don't need it to go that fast. Save yourself some money. Then you've got your motor that comes with it. Then you've got your battery. Now you need a servo. So what's a servo? Well, you take your receiver. That's where your electronic speed controller is plugged into. And you plug your servo into your transmitter as well, usually channel 1. So channel 2 is your electronic speed controller. Channel 1 is your servo. You would think it'd be the other way around, but that's just the way it is. So it's plugged in like this. What does this do? When you turn left and right, or you turn your steering, this will turn. Simple as that. Now that is connected to your steering, and that's what gives you your steering. Now what version of these should you buy? There is hundreds and hundreds of these. You want the standard size. You don't have to go super expensive. Some of the more high-end ones, the Savox and stuff like that, there's lots and lots on Banggood. And for this kind of kit, you don't need a super fast servo either. You're not racing, you're just playing around in the garden or you're driving over gravel. So anything that's around sort of the £15 mark, they tend to have how much strength they have on them by kg. If you're going more 4x4 crawler that needs more power in its steering, then you get one that's more powerful. But in something like this, you don't need to go crazy. They're easy to upgrade later on, so don't go too expensive and don't stress too much. It's more about the size, getting the right size, because if you get one that's oversized, so you want the standard, then you might have problems with it fitting. But in the instructions it will tell you, also online it will tell you what size to get, but they tend to be a standard size. And that's your servo. And that's all that pretty much goes into, I've got 2 servos here, there's another one. That's all that pretty much goes into an electronic car. Now it sounds like a lot. Excuse me. It still sounds like a lot, but it's not really. And if you don't go high end, you'll be surprised how little it actually costs you to get yourself up and running with your first RC car. Now there's loads of groups, join the groups. If you pick your kit, you'll probably find there's a Facebook group for that kit, and loads of people will be happy to help you and things like that. So that's pretty much it. So go for it, get your first build car, do a bit of research online, and you'll be off and running. Thanks very much. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. I'm sorry about the voice. Oh my God, it's driving me crazy. Bye-bye.